Chapter 3, Lesson 1 of Geometry. We're going to look at properties now of parallel lines. We spent the first video looking at the types of angles, the pairs of angles that are created when you have two lines being intersected by a single line. We're now going to look at what happens if those two lines happen to be parallel. And again, geometries are all about relationships, and what's going to happen here is we're going to have 5 different relationships that are now created whereby we can use those relationships to write equations, which again allow us then to solve or determine the values of variables or the measures of angles and those types of things. So it's important to, one, know what types of angles there are, and then 2, if the lines are parallel, what is the relationship? Because again, that is the key to geometry. So some properties of parallel lines is the first set of angles or pair of angles is that if these two lines happen to be parallel, then the corresponding angles are going to be equal. And this is a postulate. It's not provable, but we are going to accept it as fact. So I want you to notice as we go through these that all of these theorems and everything are all conditional statements. If something is true, then there's a conclusion. And so we're going to look to be fulfilling these conditionals by identifying what the hypothesis is, seeing if the diagram actually meets the condition, and if it does, then the conclusion is going to be true. Now on these 5 postulates, or as the 1 postulate and 4 theorems that we're going to be looking at in this lesson, the condition is the same for all of them if a transversal is intersecting 2 parallel lines. In the first lesson we were just looking at these 2 lines being intersected, and we looked at the 8 angles that were formed in the different pairs of angles. In this lesson, if these lines that are being intersected happen to be parallel, then these different angles have these relationships. So the first one here again is that the corresponding angles will be congruent. So the condition again is that the lines that are being intersected are parallel, and if that's true, then the corresponding angles, all pairs of those corresponding angles, are going to be congruent. That does not mean that all of the angles are congruent to each other, but each pair of angles, the 2 angles in that pair, are congruent to each other. Okay, so corresponding angles are congruent to each other if the lines that are being intersected are parallel. So that's the first one. Now I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but you can stop the video and write down those definitions, and then I want to concentrate on just maybe doing some examples later once we know what these are. Alright, the next one has the same condition. If the lines are parallel, then the alternate interior angles are also congruent. So the correspondings are congruent, and the alternate interiors are equal as well. So 1 would be equal to 3 in this diagram. Again, the condition is you have to have parallel lines. If they are, then these alternate interior angles are going to be congruent to each other. The next one is the alternate exterior angles. So the alternate exterior angles are also congruent if, again, the condition is that the lines being intersected are parallel. So if you have parallel lines, then these alternate exterior angles are congruent. Now I paired these up together because all 3 of these first 3, the postulate and the 2 theorems that I gave you, the angles are all congruent. So the corresponding pairs are congruent, the alternate interior angles are congruent, and the alternate exterior pairs are congruent. So those 3 go together because the angles in those 3 scenarios are congruent. I now want to go to the same side interior and same side exterior. If again the condition is met that the lines are parallel, then the exterior angles, the same side exteriors, are supplementary, not equal. And the little trick I use is same side starts with S and supplementary starts with S. So if the same side exterior angles, again the condition is the lines are parallel, then those same side in exterior angles will be supplementary. So in this case, angle 2 plus angle 3 would be equal to 180 degrees. Now the same side interior angle theorem is pretty much the same thing. Again, if the condition is met that they are parallel, then the same side interiors are also supplementary. So the same side interiors are supplementary and the same side exteriors are supplementary. So we talked about 5 theorems in this lesson, or excuse me, 4 theorems in one postulate, all that have the same condition that the two lines being intersected are parallel. And if they are, we have 5 new relationships which will allow us then to write 5 equations as we're looking at our diagram. So the corresponding angles pairs, those are congruent. The alternate interior angle pairs, they're congruent. The alternate exterior angle pairs, they are congruent. So those are all one angle equals another. The same side interior angles are supplementary, so that two angles added together equal 180, and the same side exteriors are supplementary, meaning you add the two together and they are supplementary, or they equal 180 degrees. So those angles, those pairs of angles should help us then that in any diagram where I have parallel lines and I have transversals, that if I know the measure of just one, combining all of these relationships that I now know, vertical angles congruent, correspondings congruent, alternate interiors congruent, alternate exteriors congruent, same side interior supplementary, same side exterior supplementary, so 6 different relationships, I should be able to calculate the measure of all of the angles in a diagram as long as I know just one, because I can work my way around and figure out the measure of each one of those. So I'll leave that for you to tackle on your own. I will do some examples if needed, but those are the 5 relationships introduced in this lesson. And again, remember, the one condition is that the two lines that are being intersected have to be parallel to each other. Otherwise, we don't have any congruent angles. We still have all of those angle pairs, but they're not congruent. That condition is that the lines have to be parallel.